It's awfully sad to see a world that so easily obeys to something that could very well be wrong, but because it threatens their very job or whatever, they obey. So whether it is right or wrong, it matters not, because they would rather obey. And so that is taking their life and taking their soul ultimately, because their human expression is being suppressed. It's being controlled, it's being manipulated, and the only person truly in control of you is yourself. So why suppress the self? One must be honest. One must tell it like it is. One must truly express and be themselves by all means possible. And yes, I mean by all means. Okay, so let's talk about something for a second. Okay, because I know that can even be perceived different ways. I would rather someone be edgy than they were a robot. Okay, it is much better to be edgy than to be a robot. And the reason why is because only then are you human. Only then do you care to have fun. Only then do words not matter so much, and you're not super sensitive to everything that's happening. Because the truth is, words will hurt people 100%. But in the time that you may use those words, if they did not hurt people, they were not edgy then. I mean, they were not, bad to the people you were talking to. All of a sudden they get released later on, and they're bad because people look at it from an outside point of view. They must understand that edginess comes from the freedom that is dangerous, not the slavery that is peaceful, that just submits at every turn, at every corner. So celebrities fall prey to this often because they have a past of problems. Okay, and they are problems, and they know it's problems. They say sorry, they make all these apology videos and so forth, and some of them you see way too repetitively, people making all these fancy scripts and stuff just to apologize. I mean, that within itself is a little counterintuitive. You have to question the real intentions here. And the realist person would be the one who comes out and tries to communicate about it and is most open about it, and needs time to get away from it in order to recoup and etc. Try to find themselves again, But if you talk about the past, it's the past, right? And there's always problems that you see, perhaps with the past, like I said, because you were doing things at a certain time and didn't realize you were doing it. There's a lot of things that people are unconscious of, whether it comes to food or thoughts, on a day-to-day basis. And it's very hard for humans to be conscious of everything going on at once, and to basically always be among the PC, political correct, terminology for everything. Because it is being free that makes an entertainer. It is being free that creates creativity. So one must be free to even express. And one must understand that being edgy is not a bad thing. Okay, now being edgy does not mean insulting people, especially behind their backs. Okay? And particularly the worst type of insult is a direct one, or about a certain person, and an action that is done that harms somebody, or it's seen that you're blatantly racist because you did a certain act that is blatantly racist, right? But speaking out about certain things in general is just words. It is just expression. Now, I use the example racism. I don't want to excuse racism ever. There is no excuse, right? All of us are humans. There's no such thing as this race baiting that we have set in this world, at least. And it's funny because the people who often complain about such an issue are the ones trying to bring us toward robotics. They want to get away from the edginess, and thus, they probably can't take a joke most of the time. Or it's harder for them to take a joke and realize that some comments are literally just jokes, because everybody, and there's a lot of them, who love to just have fun by speaking whatever without actually thinking about what they said. So is that something to learn from? Yeah, in a way, for sure. But is that something you should suppress your human nature about? No, you be honest and say, I wasn't really thinking, and I don't mean it to insult anybody, but I was just joking. The intention always matters, and this is something I made as a very big point when it came to past controversies that I've also covered on my channel. So, people should not start throwing attacks and saying all this stuff about someone who made edgy comments in the past, and start looking at those actions, start looking at those intentions, because that's what matters here. No one is racist unless they've actually done a racist act and actually directly talks about certain people in such a derogatory way. Having certain flags and stuff does not equate to you being racist. If anything, it's history. It might just end up in your hands and so forth. Now, of course, there is question as to why you would have it, but again, then you should look for honesty and not jump to accusation and say, well, this person has this, so it must be there for that. Honesty helps us reach the intention. So, am I playing devil's advocate again by saying, well, yeah, there's room for edginess? Well, it's also me defending controversy. I put out a video called Controversy Isn't to be Feared. Nobody should fear their own controversy in order to get past it. Everybody is pretty much inevitably going to face some sort of controversy as they grow in fame, especially if they are at most human and express themselves. Which tends to be a lot of celebrities, because they got famous because they expressed themselves, like I said. That's what made it contagious. That's what made it very intriguing for people to watch, to listen to, or whatever. People like that. People like the humanity. People do not like the robotics, but they're training themselves to like the robotics, but they don't truly like the robotics. They're stuck in this religion type of mental schism that tells themselves, yeah, well, the world can be perfect, and it must be perfect, thus I must attack everybody around me to make it perfect for myself. But the problem is, it's not about pointing the fingers at other people, which so many are likely to do. It's about just being yourself and living life, which includes some level of controversy. Okay, but you don't think about it as controversy because you're just living life and having fun, which life is supposed to be. Like I said, it's different when you start adding harm into the picture. It's different once you start adding the actions and the specific things that are going to be derogatory and discriminatory. Those things are very bad, and everybody should know it's bad, inherently by natural law. But saying certain things, just generally out in the open, just to have fun and make a joke in a certain moment, if somebody's looking back at that, they should not be necessarily so sorry. They can be like, oh yeah, I didn't really think that much, but that's natural. It's natural to grow up and develop a higher neocortex and say, wow, I can make better words now. Wow, I can form my sentences better now. Wow, I don't make, stupid, blatant statements that don't have as much thinking behind it. But that is just natural to growing up. Now you're going to say, oh, well, some people just don't grow up fast enough, and thus they make mistakes down the road. Okay, but again, if it's not actually harming anybody and so forth, is it really a concern? And yes, I said words can harm people. They definitely can, but is it direct, or is it something that's just generally being spoken of? Because, let's face it, somebody who feels like they're being discriminatory upon, if you ask somebody else who is pretty much the same, just like them, they are just going to take that as a joke too. Like, people make mistakes. It is what it is. It happens, and, they didn't probably mean it, and, they would treat me with respect. Like, people don't know people, especially celebrities. They don't know who they are as a person, truly, even if they, hang out a lot and so forth. They don't know them truly as a person. Truly, deep down inside, somebody could be super innocent. They can, and say certain things that they didn't mean to say, because they were in a certain environment at a certain time. Maybe they were drunk, maybe they were on drugs, maybe they had a sugar high. Who knows what could have caused a certain behavior in someone perfectly innocent? But it happens a lot in the modern world because we have so many influences, especially telling us what to do. Which, again, I said, obedience is taking over people's lives. So that doesn't just mean obedience to people. It means obedience to what others tell them and pressure them to be and say, but also the foods that pressure people to think certain ways, but also the television, but also the politicians. But truly, the only source that should be influencing them is themselves in nature, and maybe their family at most, which, it can come from their family and very well from their own culture. These are not things to be ignored nor suppressed. It's how we carry it out into the world and actually express it and what it manifests into. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of semantics. A bunch of people just arguing online in forums and Reddits and whatever about a bunch of mumbo-jumbo about some past event that doesn't even matter. Because that is often what internet controversy is. All the aspects that I mentioned sort of sums up what an internet controversy is. And these controversies, and I'm sure I've detailed many times before, these controversies are to be learned from, from the person who is so-called controversial, but also from the receiver, because the receiver feels like they should not learn from it. And that is a problem, when the receiver thinks they should not learn from it. Whether they're defending or offending, it doesn't matter, any of that. Everybody should be able to learn from it, in the sense that not because people are triggered, but because edginess like such can happen and manifest in such a way where people take things out of hand, especially on the internet online age. But not just learning that, learning the difference between edginess and being a complete PC robot. Which that distinction must be made in the modern world, for which we are growing into these PC robots. If we're growing towards that, then something is going to be forgotten, and that is our roots, the freedom, the controversy, the edginess that the internet was born out of, that much of society, like I said, is born out of, the creativity was born out of, and so forth, the inspiration, and there's great reason as to why people do these things, like I said. Okay, so these are not aspects to be ignored. Nobody should suppress their human expression. And when they start to, you realize there's always more problems, actually, than if they were to just say sorry and just listen to what everybody else says. Because people want to see someone be themselves. And, there is limits, of course, that people should express themselves. But those limits, like I said, come down to the harm, the impact, the manifestation of those actions, and the words and how direct they are. Okay? Now, like I said, we also live in a world super sensitive. Anything could take into offense, and such is also a reason why people should love a human being, any human being, no matter who they are. And if they are to actually hate anybody, they should perhaps hate the most the politicians, the people who actually want to rule over your life. There's plenty of bad people out there, and some people get a lot of hate for certain things, when other people probably could use a lot more hate for righteous reasons, again, concerning action and impact. So this is the big problem with internet controversy. It's often a distraction from greater threats at hand within the world. And yet the question why some people will invest so much time into an internet controversy and to talking about it and to providing evidence and looking for every little detail to try to expose somebody, there's got to be question to that, and to why that is. Okay? Now, like I said, some of it can be reasoned and be like, okay, well, this is quite questionable. I want to see how people think about this. Is it offensive and so forth. But the truth to the matter is that we must also understand the nature of human beings and the nature of our world. We will give up our nature if we give in to what other people expect of us and to, unifying everybody, under one government and so forth. This is nonsensical to nature, which is diverse and multicultural, but not necessarily in the intermixing of cultures and the degradation of every culture. I mean, cultures should love one another, all cultures and all people, and still have their distinctness. It's the polarity that should be kept, between the good and the evil, both, and not so extreme looking at either ends, and realizing that there is a greater love to things, that if somebody is doing something edgy for a joke, there's actually a good incentive in there. It's not so bad. If they're looking to do a joke, they're looking to make someone laugh, they're trying to just, express, like I said, and that is not a bad thing, especially in a world that is afraid to express, afraid to be themselves. And the masks and everything that's happening to society is all just examples of further denaturing, people leaving their nature and submitting to something that isn't themselves. When most people generally know deep down inside that there's no reason for it. And if they find a reason for it, great. But if they don't, then why should they? Wear it out of just, expectation and pressure, which is the worst of all things. Not even what is present as the problem. So I want people to understand that from controversy. Yes, the controversy is there for a reason. People should learn from and so forth. But the surrounding factors often go so misunderstood, so forgotten. And when you understand then those missing factors or those surrounding factors and then account for the situation itself, you have this holistic picture of what the problem is. And that problem is never, ever, ever limited to the one person of the controversy. The one person of the one controversy, which is actually many controversies of many people, and it is never, ever tied to one thing. So let's stop acting as if it is and wrapping our heads around certain things just so it gets more media publicity and more clicks and more drama and attention, because the internet feeds that up. The internet loves it, and that's why I don't really talk about a whole lot of other people on this channel. I don't say names specifically and all this other stuff. It's nonsense. Why should anyone? I shouldn't have to argue with anyone either. If somebody's mad at me, you talk reason about the general sense of things and not so much about the specific person. And, everybody can learn. It's not just a learning process for one person. We can always learn. Doesn't matter who you are. But when someone feels superior because of this and because of that, and then one also feels super down because of this or because of that, we're looking at the extremes to which one feels like they can rule, and one person feels like they have to obey. One person is the slave, one person is the master, one person is the weak child, and the other person is the strong dinosaur parent. This is an extreme that needs to be solved only through a holistic equation where we can find true equality. And true equality only comes thereof understanding natural law, that we're all humans, that human qualities must be upheld, that yes, controversies are there for a reason, but we also must not put down the reason behind why people do what they do. Can jokes go too far? Yeah, jokes can probably go too far, but did they mean it? And the answer most of the time, if somebody's joking, is no. This is the case for pretty much 99% of jokes. Unless they're intentionally trying to put ridicule on someone, which is not an often case. Again, it's usually direct insult. So, this is just the nature of things. This is just the truth to the situation, as I like to call it. I don't intend to, again, defend controversy or defend any problems that are existent within certain people. They must be addressed, but only by, themselves and their own evaluation of if they, truly agree with the statements they made in any way, or if it was actually a joke, and they should admit to what it actually is and not just say what people want to hear. They need to speak the truth. The truth will always win. The truth always goes the long way. It's what solves the personal problem and the external problem manifested in long term. So one must always stick by it. And of course, the most transparency, the better. The most transparency, the better. The more realistic apologies, the better. The most realistic people, the better. Which, like I said, is going to involve some controversy because it's just part of human life. To be controversial in different ways, even if you're making fun of objects, making fun of foods, people do it all the time. And, people are going to take offense to even that nowadays. So let's understand this dynamic of offense that we have created, and that, robots don't take offense to anything. They don't feel anything. They have no empathy, no sympathy, nothing. It's just dead energy. Whatever comes to them is what comes to them. They're given orders by their masters, and guess what? This is what most of society is becoming. We cannot let that continue, and if folks really wonder, well, then how do you really stop it? Well, you have to express, be transparent, yes, learn from your, mistakes, but if they're the past, there's not much you can do about it. You can admit to it, but you have to say that actions are very much important, and, you would never do something bad. When you're just joking, it's usually in a certain environment and so forth. And guaranteed that's the situation for most people. Maybe they just don't word it like that, or the words don't come to them in that situation, and like I said, a whole bunch of pressures are involved, so they just want to say what people want to hear, especially when there's hundreds of thousands of millions of people telling them left and right what to do and what to say, and how to feel, right? Like, you should be ashamed, oh, you're a bad person. Like, they're literally subconsciously telling them how to feel about the situation. And thus, no wonder why someone would need a break after that, hearing all that. It's like, I need to get away and try to find myself again after being told everything about that. And so, it's either full compliance, or you try to find yourself again and then, come back strong and even more transparent. And that should do the deal for most celebrity-like controversy situations. But yeah, of course, there's a very big dynamic to it, and I do feel bad for celebrities in many regards, because there is a lot of factors that the general public may not take into account. But of course, there's also a lot of problems with celebrities that also must be taken into account. It's an insider-outsider thing. The insider's never going to see what some of the outsiders will see, and then it's a matter of trying to transmit the message, which can be very difficult. And this whole internet controversy thing with anybody is always an insider-outsider conflict. So better always resolved when the two are talking, right? So just direct consultation. But that's not going to happen when there's millions of fans, and there's, internet boards and so forth, and there's past history, and it's always there and so forth. And so you got to clear your mind, clear your conscience, try to be yourself through all of it, which within itself on the internet is not an easy thing to do, unless, of course, you don't have much of an image on the internet. And so some people might just think of leaving the internet altogether. But you know what? That helps for a short amount of time if you have to just clear your mind and get back to it. You can get back to it, and you can come back stronger than ever. So that might be the case. That might be the deal. Just don't quit it entirely. If you know it's a part of you, if you know it's what helped you become you in a sense, one with the modern world, it's still one of nature, regardless. If there's the nurturing aspects within, that you can still be of nature. And people must know that. People must know that nature's everywhere, all around us. All it does is it seeks alignment. So, What can people do? It's not just expressing themselves, it's teaching natural law, learning natural law, understanding where true equality comes from. It's in humanity. It's not in select factors ever, and select words and select anything, which, within itself is usually the topic of controversy. Select things that were said about select, people, about select ideas, whatever, right? So notice how we have a lot of fixations, and those fixations tend to always go to the extreme because people look for it. They actively look for it, and that itself is a problem. So let's not ignore the innate, very much ignored, surrounding holistic factors in any controversy. Thank you for listening. This is Corey Angelot. Nature is the answer. Of course, it would be bad to joke around about immoral acts because it's immoral. So, of course, that is where people can draw the line. It should be obvious. Laughing about torture or death or anything that is super serious, because that is no laughing matter. But other things, you can pretty much laugh about anything and make anything into a joke. It just depends on how you approach it, how you say it. As some will get offended when some curse, but may not get offended when other people curse. It's just the way things are. It's how people approach it. It's their intentions of what matters. You can make something that could be rather sad or serious into something that's fun by making it a joke. And there's plenty of things that you can talk about. Even video games, right? Bad things can happen to people in video games, but we use it as a way of joke or having fun. We don't think too much about it because we just think about having fun. It's an emotion. It's not so much in the mind.